Good afternoon, my fellow environmental science students. Hello from the chilly Northwoods of Minnesota. Fits quite well with the class we're taking, actually, as we've been having some pretty unusual weather up here. A little bit of unusual weather as far as this area is concerned, anyway. It's been well above freezing the last couple days, and everything's melting really, really early. Many people say it depends on the year, but it seems to be a little earlier than ever, according to most. So fits quite well with what we've been learning about. But anyway, thanks for tuning in for my PowerPoint on these week's chapters 8 and 9, Sustaining Biodiversity, Saving Species, and Saving Ecosystems. I'm going to break down each chapter based around the key questions in the chapters in the textbook, and then go in depth a little bit more about the information covered in those chapters. Then I got a couple slides at the end, diving into some of my questions, personal thoughts, and addressing some of the issues and how they affect my life. So here we go. So Chapter 8, Sustaining Biodiversity and Saving Species. Pertaining to this chapter, how it digs into the ways different animal species are affected by climate change and man-made alterations of habitat and direct impact those species from human activity. Picture here some animals that are either threatened or endangered, including the giant panda, the polar bear, the whooping crane, the European honeybee, like is mentioned in the core case study in Chapter 8, Yellowstone gray wolf, and a black rhinoceros. I'm going to jump to the next slide. And we talk a little bit about what role do humans play in the loss of species and ecosystem services. Basically, it revolves around accelerated extinction rates. So human activity causing climate change much faster than is normal, causing species to become endangered or threatened as we define it. Endangered being near extinction, numbers low enough that they're on the brink of extinction. Threatened being a more short-term viability, but they are approaching numbers that will put them closer into the endangered species category. The California condor being pictured here is a great example that I found in the book. They had numbers as low as 9 in the wild, and are now well up over 400, but those numbers can change depending on climate and human interaction. So Chapter 8 then asks, why should we try to sustain wild species and ecosystem services they provide? Basically, animals play a wildly important and critical role in the ecosystems that they live in and that they thrive in. Their roles allow that ecosystem to thrive. Each species plays a role not only keeping its own species around, but also how it affects the species around it. For example, the orangutan here on the right was an example in the book. One that I thought was awesome in how the book described it as it consumes plants that it then disperses the seeds through its waste, helps to grow those plants, which then feed other animals, and how they can spread other seeds from other plants. So it's kind of like a big, helpful feedback loop. The natural capital of the animals, that's basically what that is how they all help the environment continue along. The book also mentioned the 4 points of basically ethical reasons as to why we should try to sustain wild species in the ecosystems and their services. They have a right to exist. We shouldn't necessarily be able to decide what animals get to exist and which ones don't. They're already here, they exist, so it is our responsibility to make sure that they continue to do so. The ecosystem services they provide, like the orangutan, helping the environment by spreading seeds. They have a huge impact on the environment. Any changes in that can have a huge impact on how that environment continues forward, as well as economic services. They help us in our eyes, as well as far as economic services go. So things like ecotourism, people wanting to go check out different habitats, different animals, and the income that brings into that area, as well as like the honeybee from a couple of slides ago, pollinating a huge portion of U.S. crops and giving us a lot of our food that we eat on a daily basis. And the last one being extended impact. We're unsure of how the climate change and how species coming and going can have a long-term impact, and it's not really something we should try to find out. So keeping those species around, since they already do fit within the environment that currently exists, is huge. So trying to prevent any long-term major negative changes. The next question being, how do humans accelerate species extinction and degradation of ecosystem services? Humans tend to tax the environment as populations expand, as resources are taken and consumed and the environment is altered and or destroyed. HIPCO was the acronym that the book used, habitat destruction, degradation, and fragmentation, which then in turn makes the environment more susceptible, to further destruction, further like disease, and changes, encroachment from invasive species, things like that. The I being invasive species, non-native species moving in and outcompeting the native species. The first P being population growth of humans and the encroachment on other animal environments. Pollution that is dumped into the environment through human activity. Climate change, and overexploitation of resources as humans take resources. I think a picture on the right there that I found on Audubon.org is a great example of fragmentation as well as exploitation, isolating small groups of the environment as well as stripping away much of the resources in that area. All right, next question in Chapter 8. How can we sustain wild species and ecosystem services they provide? Basically, putting things into action like the Endangered Species Act and recognizing which animals are threatened or endangered and how we can help them and making the population aware that that is the case. Establishing things like wildlife refuges where animals can be safe, where they cannot be hunted or fished or things like that, and have minimal human contact, if any. And then kind of on a less helpful but still helpful in a way scale, the zoos, aquariums, and wildlife farms being another spot that animals can not necessarily thrive in but still survive in for future generations to check out, and with the possibility of scientists possibly reintroducing them to their native environment if they are doing well in captivity. So jumping into Chapter 9, Sustaining Biodiversity and Saving Ecosystems. What are major threats to forest ecosystems? I'm going to do a couple explanations of like old growth versus second growth forest. Old growth being relatively undisturbed, second growth being like after human interaction or natural interaction like wildfires or major windstorms. The old growth being defined as like 200 plus years of being undisturbed. And like secondary growth forests are things that obviously have rebounded, but humans have had contact with them, so that is a potential threat to those forest ecosystems. Humans harvesting and taking those trees via things like plantations or just straight up harvesting and taking trees. Plantations are monitored and managed forests by humans for the purpose of resources that they can be cycled over and over as the trees are taken and replanted. It's not completely sustainable as those areas do lose nutrients as they are harvested. But then it's a little bit better than the other options like clear cutting, where all the trees are simply felled and there's no more trees in that area. Strip cutting, slightly more sustainable, where just small strips of trees are taken, allowed to regrow, and then the next strip is taken next to it. And then selective cutting being probably one of the most sustainable versions of that, where they just take a very selective number of trees, leaving the rest of the forest to continue to grow and thrive. Either way, these can eventually result in deforestation, which is just the loss of the forest habitat in the area. So sustainable versus unsustainable practice, I'm going to talk about here in the next slide, as well as like fire ecology. I'm going to tap on that here in the next slide. Manage and sustain forests. How can we do that? Different sustainable and unsustainable practice, like I talked about before: clear cutting, strip cutting, selective cutting, prescribed burns to help the forest continue to thrive. Surface burns, prescribed burns are good for the environment, as it does burn up that like low hanging fruit, if you will. It allows the larger plants to continue to grow and thrive and spread, whereas a wildfire that may eventually result in a crown fire, the fire touching the tops of the trees and burning up everything, not being okay for the area. That is something that like the U.S. Forest Service and like National Park Service has driven home for many, many years with like the Smokey the Bear campaign, where forest fires were fought back so far that when they do happen, they're pretty detrimental to the area. So finding that balance of sustainable versus unsustainable practices and teachings. Reducing demand is another sustainable versus unsustainable practice. So as like the demand for wood goes up, more trees are cut down. So finding alternatives to reduce the demand for wood. Things like CNAF and hemp can help with that, finding resources that they grow back faster, they're more usable, they produce less waste when they are used. So finding other alternatives like that can help with the sustainable practice of managing forest. So moving into grasslands, how can we manage and sustain grasslands? Excuse me. So in the U.S., most grasslands have become land for grazing like cattle. 95% to be exact, as the book says. Only 5% of natural grasslands still exist here in the United States. It's been turned into either rangelands, which is open grazing land, or pastures, which are managed grazing land, usually using a practice called rotational grazing, where cattle are moved from area to area and letting the area that they recently grazed rebound before coming back to it. It's a little bit better for the area as opposed to overgrazing, where they just graze until that area is no longer usable and maybe in the long term not usable. So how can we sustain terrestrial biodiversity? So establishing, protecting, and enforcing wilderness areas, wildlife areas, national parks and preserves, and enforcing that area, especially in biological hotspots, as you can see in the graphic on the right there. The red highlighted areas are areas of high biological diversity. So those areas deserve even more attention than others, not that all of them don't, but enforcing that and identifying where those areas are, and also promoting like the usage of it by people, hopefully not to the point of overuse, as is some problems in national parks in the United States now, but it does happen, and as well as like maybe deciding what areas should be true wilderness areas where no humans are allowed in whatsoever, to let those areas be. Sustaining aquatic biodiversity. Some practices, as far as that goes, humans have a huge effect on the oceans. Bad practices like overfishing, dredging, and trawling are things that affect those areas. Looking at the graphic on the right are some different practices illustrated for a visual. Introducing invasives are something that happens fairly often as far as waterways go when humans interact with them. Humans have the idea of the ocean being an infinite resource, so less kind of responsibility kind of falls into that sometimes, but kind of similar to the terrestrial ways to protect it would be like establishing protected areas, especially again in biodiversity hotspots, which is difficult to do due to most of the ocean being like international waters and not governed or dictated by any one country. But there are ways to do that, like building sanctuaries and wildlife preserves in oceanic areas. So jumping into like questions here real quick at the end. Some questions that I kind of brought up and sought answers. Can we put a price on nature? Not necessarily economically, yes, but putting a price on nature as far as that goes, not entirely. Like we can use it for our economic purposes, but it is something that was here before us and will probably be here after us. Do we get to be selective on what species get protected, or do we have a choice? At this point in time, as the climate changes, a lot of this stuff is happening faster than we can deal with. So being selective as to which ones we keep, and whether it's more of an aesthetic thing or a biodiversity and how they interact with the environment is kind of the choice that we, I believe, have come down to. Is it worth fighting invasive species? Or is allowing adaptation a better idea? As far as invasives go, I think if it is harmful to the natural area and the biodiversity of the area, yes, trying to fight them back for sure, but the environment does adapt to new species, and that is also like an option, that something we can look at in the future as well. How big of an influence is culture in environmental decisions? Definitely something that comes into play when it comes to making decisions, like the book talked about. A poorer region needing more fuel wood. So rather than worry about preserving the forest, they're worried about preserving family and cutting down fuel wood and having fires to cook food and keep the house warm and such. So culture is definitely like a major impact, I think, as far as making decisions on environmental influence and preservation. Last but not least, how do these issues apply to me and what can we do to address them? It definitely affects things like day-to-day like food prices, gas prices, available products to me, long-term things like health, climate change, things getting warmer, colder, seeing animals, species, wildlife, and wilderness areas possibly disappear. So these are all some things that apply. But anyway, running out of time here, so I'm going to conclude this with thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you have any questions, please drop them below in the comments. I appreciate it. And you guys have a good one.